Good morning and welcome. I am Mark Sheppard, a member of the Board of Trustees at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Reston, and we are so glad you are with us this morning. No matter how old or young you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, however you identify, and whomever you love, know you are welcome here. Thank you for adding to our beloved community this morning. Our service today is being led by Denise Kirwan. Denise has been a member of UU Reston for 11 years. She's currently co-chair of our Social Action Social Justice Committee and has been key to the success of our popular alternative gift market by chairing that committee for several years. Denise has a 22-year-old son and lives in Leesburg with her 2 dogs. We are very pleased and grateful to have her here today leading this service, which she has entitled Reproductive Justice. We are also joined this morning by our music director, Cynthia, and by Leong, our accompanist. Our director of religious education, Linda Weaver, is off today, but you will see her in the video she prepared for Time for All Ages. Bob Anthony is serving as our worship associate this morning, and Kayla Williams is serving as the chat usher. Ron Bracy, David Niemi, Mike Schmitt, and Amelia Turner are running the technical side of worship, and we thank all of them for their participation in delivering the service this morning. Now let us center ourselves for worship. Please take a deep, quieting breath with me. And let us enter our time of worship together and enjoy Impromptu in E major by Clara Schumann, performed by Leong.
Good morning. Our opening words are from Thich Nhat Hanh, well-known Vietnamese Buddhist monk who died yesterday at age 95. People usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day, we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the curious eyes of a child, even our own 2 eyes, all is a miracle.
Good morning. We invite you to join us in singing our opening hymn, number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. We will be singing along with a lovely trio of soloists from our choir, Ali Sonovitsky, Lisa Gunderman, and Kara Fortner. Thank you to these wonderful singers for creating this video for us last year. The words will be in your chat box. Please sing along with Lisa, Kara, Ali, and Jessie.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, then we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the thought of our upstairs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Our chalice lighting words today are by Judy Harrow. Ancient Mother, please stand with me here and now. I call upon your courage, your hard-won wisdom, you who have faced hard choices and survived, you who have stood with others many times where paths diverged. Now is my hour of need. To live is to choose is to risk. Each door I open closes other doors. Every yes costs many no's.
In our church, we recommit to each other every Sunday by singing our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. We sing along with our virtual choir video featuring members of our congregation and choir. The words are in the video. If you are visiting us this morning for the first time, we hope you will accept this song as our blessing to you.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another in fellowship.
Now is the time when we invite you to share joys and concerns so that no one has to hold them alone. You may wish to light a real or virtual candle in your home to mark what is in your heart. If you would like to share in the chat, please write all the attendees and remember that what you write is public. Please read each other's joys and concerns and then enter into your own time of meditation and prayer.
We invite you now to join with us in a spirit of reflection and prayer. We are grateful for this moment to be in community with each other, to reflect on our week, and grateful for this moment of quiet to touch peace within ourselves. As we join in community, may we feel our strength together and use it for good as best we can. We hold in our hearts our community's concerns for loved ones who have passed on, and for all those who are struggling and need our care. And let us take a moment also to give thanks for our many blessings and joys, for visits from family members, for good health reports, birthdays and special occasions, and for chilly winter nights that make us especially grateful for family, home, and hearth. We hold with care and love all the joys and concerns that have been shared here and all of those that remain held in our hearts. Amen and blessed be.
The responsive reading is by Reverend Julia Hamilton. This sanctuary that we create together is a container for all our stories, the ones we share, as well as the ones we hold close and quiet in our hearts. The stories that bring us joy and fulfillment, as well as the stories that break us open. The stories that change and grow with us, as well as the stories we outgrow and leave behind. Each and every one of you carries a lifetime of stories every time you enter this space. This morning, there may be stories from your life that surface in unexpected ways. I would like to invite you into a ritual to hold space for your story, whatever it may be. And if you need support after this service, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would also like to remind you at this time that this service is not appropriate for young children. As we light a series of candles for the different paths we have taken, if you recognize yourself in one of these prayers, I invite you to put your hand over your heart, wherever you are, and know that you are not alone. There is someone else in this gathered community holding their hand over their heart, too. The congregational response after I say my words and Bob lights each candle is, may the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. You will find the words in your order of service and in the chat box. We light the first candle for those whose story includes the choice to end a pregnancy. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but each and every end is also a beginning. And so we light this candle for all who have aborted a pregnancy or partnered someone in an abortion, for whatever reason and under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. We light the second candle for those whose story includes the unwanted loss of a pregnancy or a struggle with fertility. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but the pain of infertility, miscarriage, and stillbirth are too often held in silence. And so we light this candle for all who have traveled this path of loss, for whatever reason and under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. We light the third candle for those whose story includes the choice to give birth. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but the choice to bring a new life into the world is a powerful one. And so we light this candle for all who have given birth or partnered in the birth of a child, or those who have adopted a child birthed by someone else, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. We light the fourth candle for for those whose story includes the choice not to conceive or have children. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but the freedom to chart the course of our own reproductive life is sacred. We light this candle for all who have made the decision not to conceive or bear children, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. We light the fifth candle for those whose story includes a forced choice or no choice at all, or who have encountered violence where there should have been tenderness and care. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but not everyone has been in the position to control their own reproductive choices. We light this candle for all who have found themselves unable to exercise their own sacred reproductive freedom, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. We light the sixth and final candle for those whose reproductive story is still being written. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but the future unfolds in surprising and unexpected ways that can be both beautiful and heartbreaking. And so we light this candle for all who are at the threshold, who have agency and choices still to make about their reproductive lives, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance. May the flames of these candles and the many stories they represent remind us of the fire of commitment we carry inside to ensure that all people have freedom and agency over their reproductive choices, and that reproductive justice is upheld as a fundamental right for this and future generations.
We now invite you to support the work of UU Reston by making your donation to our collection plate using the link on the slide or in your chat box. Thank you for your generosity and support of our beloved spiritual home.
Our special music today is a virtual choir video of the song What Happens When a Woman Takes Power by Alexandra Olsovsky. We created this video in August of 2020 in honor of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And today's service seems like a fitting moment to share it again. Women from our UUCR choir joined together with women and girls from around the world to create this performance. We hope you will find inspiration from the message that they share. What happens when a woman takes power?
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she rules her own body? What happens when she says the peace? What happens when she bows to nobody? What happens when she stands on her own 2 feet? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? Whoa, we rise above. Whoa, we lead with love. Whoa, we have won. We are one. We've just begun. Whoa, we rise above. Whoa, we lead with love. We have won. We are one. We've just begun. What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she rules her own body? What happens when she sets the peace? What happens when she...
Roe v. Wade was a landmark Supreme Court decision that was decided 49 years ago yesterday, January 22nd, 1973. Jane Roe was the pseudonym given to Norma McCorvey, a young woman with a difficult past who was pregnant with her 3rd child when she sought an abortion in Texas. She was referred to attorney Sarah Weddington. They challenged a Texas law that banned abortion except by a doctor's order to save a woman's life. Weddington eventually took the case to the Supreme Court. By that time, McCorvey had given birth and placed her child for adoption. The Supreme Court decision was 7-2 in favor of Roe. In the majority were Warren Burger, William O. Douglas, William Brennan, Potter Stewart, Harry Blackmun, who wrote the decision, Thurgood Marshall, and Lewis Powell. Even those of you who were not alive in 1973 should recognize several of those names as giants in 20th century American jurisprudence. In the minority were Byron White and William Rehnquist, who later became Chief Justice during the Reagan presidency. The Supreme Court's current decision to hear a Mississippi case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, that could restrict and potentially overturn Roe, is a challenge to reproductive justice in this country. But let's start at the beginning. Ever since people figured out how babies were made, people have been trying to enjoy the baby-making activity without actually making a baby. Egyptian pictographs from thousands of years before the Common Era depict condoms, although it is unclear if they were intended for contraceptive purposes or, well, for decoration. Jumping forward a few millennia to the United States in 1870, various birth control methods were available, including condoms, sponges, douching syringes, diaphragms, and cervical caps, all available via catalogs and in pharmacies and general stores. Someone must have been using something, as the fertility rate in the US during the 19th century dropped from 7 children per couple at the beginning of the century to an average of 3.5 children per couple by the end of the century. However, starting in 1873, Congress enacted a set of federal laws which came to be known as the Comstock Laws that prohibited the interstate commerce of anything considered obscene, which included contraceptives. Although some people argue that the intent of this law was to keep such items away from minors, rather than to prevent contraceptive use among adults, the fact is that several states enacted similar laws which had the effect of making birth control difficult to obtain no matter who you were. The parent act for the Comstock Laws was called the Act for the Suppression of Trade in and Circulation of Obscene Literature and Articles of Immoral Use, which made it a crime to send any of the following through the mail: obscenity, contraceptives, abortifacients, and sex toys, as well as personal letters with any sexual content or information. Several of these laws were not officially overturned until Supreme Court decisions well into the mid-20th century. By the 1950s, Americans were spending $200 million a year on contraceptives, despite the fact that there was anti-birth control legislation in 30 states. In Massachusetts, it was a felony to, quote, exhibit, sell, prescribe, provide, or give out information, end quote, about contraceptives. It doesn't say it was actually a felony to use contraceptives, but I'm not sure how you were going to obtain them if no one was allowed to exhibit, sell, prescribe, provide, or give them to you. In Connecticut, it was a crime for married couples to use birth control. Slowly, things began to change. In the late 1950s, the pill was developed and came into popular use by the early 60s after being tested on unwitting Puerto Rican women. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson supported legislation to provide birth control for the poor. However, 8 states still prohibited the sale of contraceptives. In 1967, Massachusetts liberalized its laws, but still prohibited the use of birth control by unmarried women. It wasn't until March of 1972, 1 year before the Roe decision, that the Supreme Court case of Eisenstadt v. Baird legalized birth control for all Americans, married or not. This may seem like ancient, excuse me, this may seem like ancient history to some of you, but the older members of our congregation lived through this time, and some were undoubtedly affected by these laws. Perhaps they would be willing to tell their stories during the coffee hour. Our younger members may not have realized the challenges that their parents and grandparents may have encountered while trying to build their families. It might make for an interesting and informative family discussion if you are able to bring up this topic with them. Today, 49 years after Roe was decided, we are being called once again to fight for reproductive justice in the United States. Not just the reproductive right to be able to obtain and use contraceptives, but also the right to decide when to have children or not to have any children at all. The right to be able to parent the children we have with the help of parental leave and public benefits, and the right to bodily autonomy to express our own sexuality as we see fit. To help congregations plan a Reproductive Justice Sunday, the UUA held a webinar last week to provide source materials. The current assault on Roe v. Wade was the background looming over the discussion. The Guttmacher Institute, which provides research and policy analysis on reproductive health, has stated, quote, "It is far from a foregone conclusion that the court will cast aside 5 decades of precedent to overturn Roe and allow states to ban abortion. However, by even accepting the case, the court has signaled that it is willing to revisit the legality of abortion. Furthermore, the court's September 1 decision to decline to block an unconstitutional 6-week abortion ban in Texas, known as SB 8, from going into effect may be an indicator of its intent." End of quote. Unfortunately, the speakers at the UUA webinar did not have even this slight thread of hope, as they all spoke not of if Roe is overturned, but when Roe is overturned. Let's take a look at exactly what the Roe decision says. The website oye.org summarizes the decision as follows. In the first trimester of pregnancy, the state may not regulate the abortion decision. Only the pregnant woman and her attending physician can make that decision. In the second trimester, the state may impose regulations on abortion that are reasonably related to maternal health. In the third trimester, once the fetus reaches the point of viability, a state may regulate abortions or prohibit them entirely, so long as the laws contain exceptions for cases when abortion is necessary to save the life or the health of the mother. By the way, you can actually listen to Sarah Weddington's original oral arguments in this case in her own voice at the same website, oye.org. That's oyez.org. So, Roe never gave women access to abortion at any time for any reason. It merely limited the constraints that individual states could put on the termination of a pregnancy. In response, states that are pro-life have been trying to whittle away at these restrictions for the past 40 years by placing more and more onerous conditions on the procedure. You may be surprised to find out, as I was, that conservative evangelicals were not, in general, opposed to the Roe decision in 1973. Although abortion has always been a touch point for Catholics, evangelicals, as well as the Republican Party, were largely indifferent in 1973 and for several years thereafter. In 1971, 2 years before Roe, the Southern Baptists passed a resolution encouraging, quote, Southern Baptists to work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under such conditions as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained evidence of the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. This statement was reaffirmed in 1974 and 1976. W.A. Criswell, a well-known Texas fundamentalist at the time, stated, quote, I have always felt that it was only after a child was born and had a life separate from its mother that it became an individual person. And it has always, therefore, seemed to me that what is best for the mother and for the future should be allowed. For reasons that are too complicated to go into in this sermon, but that are largely underlain by racial considerations, that attitude slowly changed over the years to land us where we are now. In fact, in June of last year, the Southern Baptist Convention called for, quote, an immediate abolition of abortion without exception or compromise. Congress has not been deaf to these attacks on Roe and has introduced 2 bills that would uphold reproductive rights. The EACH Act of 2021, Equal Access to Abortion Coverage and Health Insurance, would reverse the Hyde Amendment, which since 1976 has prohibited the use of federal funds to pay for an abortion. This has put an undue strain on those wishing to terminate a pregnancy who rely on Medicaid, TRICARE, the Veterans Administration, and the Indian Health Service, among others. This bill has been introduced in both the House and Senate, but no further action has been taken. Another bill that has already passed the House of Representatives is the WHPA. The Women's Health Protection Act is intended as a sort of end run around any looming changes to Roe. This bill would make abortion coverage a statutory right and would remove the many restrictions, such as multiple visits, mandatory counseling, and so forth, that several states impose on women wishing to terminate a pregnancy. However, this bill is unlikely to pass the Senate and could have some unintended and undesired legal ramifications if it did. The Reverend Daniel Cantor, senior minister at First Unitarian Church in Dallas, was one of the featured speakers at the UUA webinar and able to tell us what is happening on the front lines in Texas. Reverend Cantor has for several years been a chaplain at the Southwest Women's Clinic in Dallas, which provides abortions. Before SB 8, they had approximately 100 patients per day. Since SB 8 was upheld by the Supreme Court in September, despite the fact that it is in direct opposition to the nearly 50-year-old Roe decision, patient numbers have dropped by 70% to 30 patients per day. The Southwest Women's Clinic has been able to provide abortions to women who are beyond the 6-week limit by transporting them to Albuquerque, a distance of some 650 miles. Much as the clergy consultation service helped women find safe abortions in the 1960s. Initially, the Southwest Women's Clinic was taking people by car, but the time and distance involved made it unfeasible for many. So they now fly 8 to 15 women per week to New Mexico at a cost of $1,000 per person. When this court scales back or overturns Roe, many of the women in our country will be in a similar situation of being unable to find an abortion within a reasonable distance, since 26 states have laws on the books that would automatically be triggered and would make an abortion more difficult or impossible to obtain in that state. As of today, Virginia is not one of those 26 states, but our new governor, Glenn Youngkin, has stated that he will protect the life of the, quote, born and the unborn. And on Friday night, our new Attorney General, Jason Miyares, has made it clear that he intends to make Virginia an anti-abortion state. I'm not sure whether he can, since the Senate is still democratically controlled in Virginia. Make no mistake, when Roe is overturned, people of means, meaning generally white people, will still be able to get an abortion. They will go to a neighboring state. They will go to another country. They will find a sympathetic doctor to perform a therapeutic abortion, just as they did in the 60s. But women who are economically strapped will find these options to be out of reach and will either take action to end a pregnancy by illegal and medically unsound means or be forced to carry an unintended pregnancy to term. Reverend Cantor is very vocal on the need for those of us who support reproductive justice to speak up. For 40 years, the opposition has played to people's emotions by talking about babies being murdered. We calmly talked about rights and freedoms, and we lost. An article in yesterday's New York Times, which some of you may have read, emphasized the same point. A former head of Planned Parenthood and daughter of Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas who supported abortion rights, said that pro-choice leaders talked about good health care and better outcomes for the economy, while the opposition was willing to, quote, trade away people's lives for political power, end of quote. This, despite the fact that a vast majority of the country believes that abortion is warranted in at least some cases. We have to step up if we are willing. And if we are willing, Reverend Cantor says that we need to have deep spiritual support because we will be targeted, as he himself has been targeted by the other side. Reverend Cantor has three main suggestions as to how to support reproductive justice, both individually and as a congregation. 1, we must take our story public. We must tell the story of and the need for reproductive justice from the pulpit, in social media, and in the newspapers. We need to present emotional stories from our own experience. Statistics say that 1 woman in 4 has had an abortion. If we assume about 150 people in attendance on this Zoom call, and if half of them are women, then the statistics tell us that about 20 women listening today have had an abortion. Chances are that they have told very few people their story. 2, we have to become more politically savvy. We need to tell the stories of the consequences that result when reproductive freedom is denied to all. Some of these stories are painful, but when cases of rape or incest are told, people will reconsider their viewpoint of a 100% unilateral ban on the termination of pregnancy. That's a starting point. Explaining the consequences of what happens when unplanned children are born into poverty or born with handicaps for which society provides little support can also help alter opinions. 3, we need to join with lobbyists and speak to politicians. Reverend Cantor says that politicians in Texas have told him that they only hear from pro-life clergy. We need to make sure that politicians everywhere are also hearing from pro-choice clergy. This may be, as I mentioned earlier, this may be especially relevant to us in Virginia during the next 4 years. Reverend Cantor's congregation has also been active in other ways. He started an initiative in Texas called the Reproductive Freedom Congregation to end the silence around reproductive health issues and show that churches support reproductive justice. Similar to a welcoming congregation that supports LGBTQ+ rights, a reproductive freedom congregation affirms 3 principles. 1, we trust and respect women. 2, we promise that people who attend our congregation will be free from stigma, shame, or judgment for their reproductive decisions, including abortion. 3, we believe access to comprehensive and affordable reproductive health service is a moral and social good. His congregation has also started a nonprofit community outreach program called WISE, Wholly Informed Sexuality Education, based on the OWL curriculum, to bring complete and accurate sexuality education to youth in their area. What else can you do? You can let your elected representatives know that you support the EACH Act and the Women's Health Protection Act, WHPA. You can financially support some of the many organizations fighting for our reproductive rights, such as Planned Parenthood, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, the Guttmacher Institute, and the Center for Reproductive Rights, among many others. If this issue speaks to you particularly, you could attend a virtual gathering called Sacred, the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity on January 25th, 26th, this coming Tuesday and Wednesday. This webinar, sponsored by Just Texas, will provide keynote speeches, panel discussions, and breakout sessions that will explore the interdependence of faith and reproductive justice. You can find them at the website justtex.org. That's JUSTTX.org. There is a fee for this webinar, but monies are available from UUCR's Social Action, Social Justice budget for anyone who is interested. Let me conclude with this quote from the UUA's Side with Love project. Respect for bodily autonomy is a core principle of reproductive justice, and religious freedom is a core principle of American democracy. Taken together, the result is straightforward. Every person should be able to make decisions about their bodies and access health care according to their own beliefs and values. Whether or not someone chooses abortion and how they feel about it is up to them. The goal is not that everyone feels the same way. The goal is that everyone has access and support for what they need. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Denise. Please rise in your homes as you are willing or able and join us in singing hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land. The words will be in your chat box. Let's all sing together.
We build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall run on like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall run on like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand our people. Oh, come, build the land, my people we seek. Come, build the land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall run on like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Our closing words are from Rob Keithan, Minister of Social Justice at All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. For me, the equation goes like this. Religion has done a disproportionate amount of the damage to health and sexuality in this country. So I think religion has to play a disproportional role in the healing. And in fact, I think that religion and religious people have to be involved in the struggle if we're ever going to make the progress we want towards reproductive health, rights, and justice. Because the opposition to these ideas comes from religious people and groups. And when there aren't other faith voices standing up and speaking out, we give the opposition a monopoly on morality. And so what we do or don't do as a faith community really and truly matters. Let me add from the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Thank you, and blessed be.
Thank you so much to Laura Weiss, music director at the UU Church in Fairfax, for sharing another one of her beautiful videos for us to use as our postlude this week. This performance features the soloist Yvonne Haskin and a group of musicians from UUCF performing Life by Kendall Gibbons. The words are in the video, so we hope you will join in and sing along with Yvonne.
Here in reverence now we gather for the blessings we have known, with a pledge to one another that we journey not alone. Joy and sorrow make us wise, kin to all that lives and dies. Love calls us on. Love calls us on. Words and deeds of those before us, wake and here to keep us strong. Blend our voices in the chorus of creation's living song. Courage bids us lift our eyes upward to the shining skies. All calls us on. Hope calls us on. Loyal guides in love and duty, lead us with a trusted light. Blessed are they whose inward beauty shows the path of true and right. Honor is their earthly prize. By their work we realize faith calls us on. Faith calls us on. We have shared a radiant hour when the truth has made us free, and the Spirit's gracious power
be with us.
Bright the path before us lies. Joyful pilgrims now we rise. Life calls us on. Life calls us on.
Life calls us on.
Life calls us on. Life calls us on.
Life calls us on.
Life calls us on. Life calls us on. Life calls us on. Life calls us on.
We invite our congregants to join us on Zoom for our virtual Greet Your Neighbor coffee hour today to discuss the service theme and enjoy fellowship with other congregants. The link is in the chat box and on the upcoming slide. Also, please use the chat box as a virtual receiving line to leave a message about your appreciation for today's service. That concludes this morning's worship. Go in peace.